let's remind the viewers that as of October 15th of this last year, we did something really transformational at IAR. Our leadership team, thank goodness, they really thought it was extremely important to offer to our local boards and to our members at large a program where professional standards cases would be more easily filed to make sure that we're protecting the profession, to make sure we're not letting people who are out there escaping being found in violation of the code because for whatever reason what we were seeing is a lot of boards in our state that were doing these themselves were just so small in size that they had a very difficult time impaneling impartial hearing panel tribunals, right?
Right.
So what we did at IAR, and I know you and I have talked a whole lot about this, but we established a statewide professional standards program, and I'm proud to say that of our 17 local boards in the state of Iowa, 15 have now opted into the program, and IAR is now responsible for almost 6,200 realtors in this program. We've got 70 people on a panel who can hear these cases. We've got a grievance committee, so now if a complaint's filed against somebody in Sioux City, the group of people deciding whether that's going to go forward are from every single one of those 15 boards across the state. So we don't have those conflicts like we've always had.
How's it been working?
It's
good.
George, it really it's really been going well. We don't unfortunately have a lot of hard data on how many cases were filed, but from what we could gather from the local boards, it seems like our complaints have had an uptick. We've had 11 ethics complaints that have been filed since October. We've already had 2 full case hearings, and I've got like 4 more hearings set right now. So it's a very active program. It's a very time-consuming process, but we've got some outstanding realtors with tons of experience who are part of this program that have just been an honor to work with, that are taking days of their lives and out of their businesses to come sit at a table and make sure that we are protecting our profession and upholding our code of ethics, which separates realtors from any other licensee in this business.
Yeah, well, that's great. It sounds like it's been very well received. Then.
Yeah.
Is that right? You and I have talked about it a little bit, and from what you've told me, it seems like you're very happy with the progress that it's made, where it's at now, and what the future looks like for that program.
No, I think the reactions so far have been very positive. I think people who have participated in the program have had very positive reactions to it. I think we are in a very good place, and it's just going to continue to get better.
Good.
So I'm looking forward to that program, building it. It's definitely one of our great services, again, at IAR. So I just, hats off to our leadership team for making that happen.
IAR has a lot of good services to their members, and members should appreciate that.
Absolutely. So in the spirit of the Code of Ethics, we've talked about it a bunch today, right?
We have.
I don't think we can end this 90 minutes of education without talking about some of the changes that have happened to the Code of Ethics this past year at the National Association of Realtors.
Yes, I would agree. And probably the biggest change?
Yeah, the biggest change would be, let's just back up.
Okay.
Let's take this in stride here, right? So, as everybody knows, in 2020 there were all kinds of social events and things happening across the country where the topic of race and equity and discrimination and all these things were kind of front and center of the national media, right?
Correct.
These things were happening. And NAR, the National Association of Realtors, what they've said is they were receiving a significant uptick in volume of calls and receiving more and more complaints of realtors in areas of the country who were posting maybe on social media's channels things that were very concerning to some of these associations that directly related to claims of sort of discrimination against people in unprotected classes. So what NAR was asked to do, George, was to sort of bring together its different committees. It has many of them. But to bring together some of these committees who look at policy and professional standards issues and look at how the code really operates in light of some of these issues. And what we knew before these changes was the Code of Ethics, through policy statement 29 in the code, really only applied to realtors in a real estate transaction, only to their conduct when they were at the, making offers or representing clients in a transaction, right? There wasn't really a clear mechanism to have any enforcement powers over realtors who were leaving the transactions at 5:05 p.m. and going and being, blatant discriminatory racist at 5:10 p.m., right? And, that was the sort of question, like, what does the Code of Ethics do? How do we handle this kinds of situation? So what happened is there was a change, right? The Code of Ethics now applies to all conduct of a realtor.
That's key.
That's key.
That's big difference, because I agree with you. I think before it was interpreted to apply only while the realtor was in the middle of a transaction or doing a transaction as a realtor,
Yep.
right? Like I say, 5:05, they're done, do whatever they want. But now what you're saying,
Yep.
and I agree with you, I've read that, what you're saying is now the code applies 24/7.
All conduct of a
Is
realtor.
that right?
Right.
24/7.
That's
Wow.
right.
That's
Because
big.
it is a change, but at the same time, George, Article 10 of the Code of Ethics has always said, right? It said for a long time. Before this was changed, Article 10 said, you have to offer equal professional services to all people, and you can't discriminate against people in protected classes in a real estate transaction, right?
Correct.
But I think part of the argument that's been made is if you might be in your private life, but if you are saying things out there very publicly that everybody can see that suggest you can't provide equal professional services to somebody because of what protected class they're in, yes, that is now a situation that is within the purview of the Code of Ethics.
Okay.
So again, it's a change, but it is within the spirit, sort of, I think, of what Article 10 has said all along.
Yeah, and that I would agree with you. I think the spirit of Article 10 says that. I think this is just putting it in writing.
Yeah.
Is that right? So it's clear, and realtors, now you know the rules that guide that type of conduct.
Yep. And one of the things that was added was Standard of Practice 10-5, which really does add teeth to this, right? Because Standard of Practice says realtors must not use harassing speech, hate speech, epithets, or slurs based on race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familial status, national origin, sexual orientation, or gender identity, okay? So that's what's in play. You cannot use very specific things: harassing speech, hate speech, epithets, slurs. They're very specific terms, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the things that always comes up, right, is, a lot of the thing is, so does this mean we can't express any opinions, like, whatsoever, or is this like totally restricting our, ability to say anything that one person might deem to be unpopular or might not align with their views?
Yeah, well, I don't think it inhibits you from voicing your opinions, right? Your views, right? But I think what it does is say, our rules now tell you you can't do this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. And there's a lot of people saying, First Amendment, right? First Amendment. And we do have the First Amendment. It's a very important thing. It's a part of our Bill of Rights. But one thing I think that's important to keep in mind is the First Amendment, go back to the language of it. Congress shall make no law to abridge the freedom of speech. State governments can't abridge the freedom of speech, but of course, NAR and our associations of realtors are private trade organizations.
Yeah, and as a private trade organization, they have the authority over its members, if you will, to put in place these rules, these ethics that we're talking about, these amendment standards of practice that we're talking about now.
Exactly.
They completely have that authority to do.
Exactly. And I think another thing, the one final change, George, we want to mention to the members is there was a newly amended definition of the public trust.
Yes.
That's important because if you are found in violation of the Code of Ethics, generally that does not get referred on to the licensing entity. That's just an internal association decision. But our code requires us to forward any findings of violations of the public trust onto the licensing authority. And that definition of the public trust now includes all discrimination against people within the protected classes. So again, within that new standard of 10-5, a finding of that by rule would be forwarded on to the licensing authority.
Okay. That's big.
Yeah.
So now there's some teeth into this now, right?
Yes.
So licensees violate it. Now we might have an ethical violation. Plus, we have a license issue.
Right.
All right?
Yep.
The licensing authority will look at this and say, has it gone beyond what's acceptable? Has it been violated? We're going to have to look at your license.
And of course, George, we know both. The Real Estate Commission has their own process. They're a totally
yes.
independent entity of us.
Yes.
You know, what they would do with that finding, I don't know.
No,
That would
sure.
be totally within their purview and discretion. But per our side of the rules, which I'm concerned with, you know, that would be a finding that now, per the new definition of public trust, would be forwarded on to the Iowa Real Estate Commission.
Okay. I think that's important. I think all members of the profession need to know that.
Yep.
Right? And just take note of that in your conduct.
Yep.
Okay. in your
Absolutely.
conduct.
So you look, you know, you and I talked about some of these definitions, right? Because what we're talking about here is really a very, very specific set of conduct, right?
Yep.
We're talking about hate speech. We're talking about epithets. We're talking about slurs, and they apply if someone's within a protected class. You got to meet both criteria to fall within the standard of practice 10-5, right?
Right.
I mean, do we need to talk a little bit about how the dictionary maybe defines hate speech, how it defines epithets?
I think we do.
Yeah.
And the reason I think we do, because I think if we have an understanding of what that definition is, I know we're going through the dictionary definition. I think it'll help us understand what type of conduct is prohibited, if you will.
Yes.
Okay. So let me start out with the dictionary definition of hate speech.
Yep.
Okay. Hate speech. Again, dictionary definition. Speech that is intended to insult, offend, or intimidate a person because of some traits such as race, religion, sexual orientation, national origin, or disability. Again, speech that is intended to inflict, offend, or intimidate a person because of some trait. Okay, they mentioned, you know, race, religion, sexual orientation, for example, you know.
So it's very, very specific. I mean, it's the type of speech that is so out there and abhorrent or something, right? That, I mean, it's going to immediately, you know, be so offensive to someone that it might even stir them to action or something like that.
Oh,
right? I mean,
exactly.
it's a big thing.
Because, you know, you hear that term hate speech thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's good for the viewers to have a definition of it, understand what it is. And I think that would help them understand what that new standard of practice 10.5 is. Okay?
Absolutely.
How about epithet? What do you have for that?
Epithet, according to Merriam-Webster, it is a characterizing word or phrase accompanying or occurring in place of the name of a person or thing, a disparaging or an abusive word or phrase. So again, very specific. We're not going to say anything obviously on here. That would be, you know, but people I think can look into that definition and think of the types of things that might be considered an epithet. Right?
Absolutely. I think if someone violated that concerning epithets, I think we would all know. Right? I think it's very specific, very, very clear what it is. Very clear what it is. And slur.
Yep.
That's the other thing, right? The
Yep.
third thing, slur. An insulting or disparaging remark or innuendo. A shaming or degrading effect, stain, stigma.
Yep.
Okay, so again, an insulting or disparaging remark or innuendo.
Yep.
So, now, you know, you hear it. It happens. You don't like to hear it sometimes, but it's just what some people say. You know?
Yeah, and again, I think when you look at some of the guidance that we have on this, you know, everybody might react a little bit differently. What we're talking about is things that are objectively, when you say it, everybody looks at each other and knows.
They know.
That, you know, this is a slur. This an epithet. This is exactly what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. It's not the sort of thing that maybe one person, you know, or the 10 people subjectively feel a little bit differently about, right? We're talking about very clear category of behavior and speech here.
Right. Gabe, let's take this one step further. Okay, I just have a question one step further. So we've talked about it now, right? We've got some definitions out on the table. We've reviewed that new standard of practice. How does all this relate to social media? Let me tell you why I asked that question. Okay, as we know now, a lot of our work is done via social media. Right, a lot of it is done social media, and in addition to that, a lot of it is done technology-wise with your emails and your texts and all that, right? But your social media, what you're putting out there via your social media modems. How does this affect a realtor's ability to use their social media? What should they be made aware of?
Well, George, I think there's a couple things, right?
Yeah.
You're so right. We're in this age where so many people are on social media for so many different things, right? And all I can say is, everybody needs to be aware that these provisions exist and that there are enforcement mechanisms to hold you accountable if you are engaging in this type of conduct, right? So questions I get sometimes, right? Clearly now the rules say very clearly that if you're on your own private Facebook page after hours, doesn't matter. But, sometimes people get into these like national posts, right? Where there's like 77,000 comments. You start typing something and it's like, well, nobody's ever going to see that. There's 77,000 comments, right? But
they'll find it.
But that's the sort of thing, right? Or, what if there's something that somebody else posts that is very clearly meets these criteria and you like it, or you give it a thumbs up or whatever, right? Again, we're not going to offer any suggestions on what the outcome would be in those cases because our hearing panels have very clear guidelines that they're going to review if these kinds of complaints are filed, and the very specific facts of the situation matter. But yeah, I mean, in this era of social media, everything you say, yeah, I mean, it's important.
But what that tells me then is that we just have to think twice. We just have to be careful.
Yeah.
All right. We just have to be careful on what we post or what we like.
Yeah.
And
you know what though, George? I mean, I've been in this position over a year and a half now, and I've had the great opportunity of meeting realtors across the state, some of the best people, largely you ever will meet in your life. And I mean, really, I think we understand what our obligations are and what our responsibilities are, and to make sure that whatever we do, that we're all in this together to try to give every single person in this state, right, the outstanding service of a realtor, to make sure that at every point they get the best advice, the best guidance of a realtor who's going to help them make one of the biggest transactions of their life, right? So we're all in this together, and I really believe with this association that we are going to do great things and move forward. And
let me ask you one follow-up
Yeah.
on this, okay? And this is from a lawyer's point of view.
Yeah.
Where does due process come in? Does due process come in?
Due process is important. And I think we need to talk about our procedures and our process that we have, right?
Right.
If somebody files an ethics complaint, okay, and they say somebody engaged in a violation of standard of practice 10-5 and therefore violated Article 10, right? It's not like that's going to come to my desk and a group of 3 of us are going to look at it and be like, oh, guilty, kick them out of the association, right? It doesn't work like that. We have a process in place where it goes through a grievance committee. The grievance committee looks and says, is it possible if a hearing panel looked at this that they could find a violation? If so, it goes on to a hearing panel. At that point, a hearing panel is going to allow the respondent an opportunity to provide a written response and submit all the documentation they want. They're going to let the respondent be represented by a realtor of their choosing and an attorney of their choosing in the ethics process. They're going to get a peer or a group of 5 of their peers who are going to hear their entire case. They're going to have an opportunity to cross-examine witnesses, cross-examine the complainant, and fully defend themselves. If they don't like the decision of the hearing panel, they're still going to have an opportunity to appeal that to the board of directors and a higher authority before any disciplinary action would ever be imposed. So there are substantial due process safeguards that are in place that have always been in place.
Okay. All right. If you had to summarize what we just learned, summarize our discussion on this new change,
Yep.
What would you say to the viewers?
Treat everybody the same. Treat everybody with respect. Be a part of everybody in their role in achieving the American dream of home ownership, and just do the right thing.
Yeah. And I would agree with you. A while ago I had the opportunity, the privilege, if you will, to speak to a group of realtors, many realtors, a couple hundred of them maybe. And at the end of the day, I took some questions.
Yeah.
And the first person raised their hand. They said, George, if there's one thing that you could tell us just one thing, if you could tell us, what would it be? Gabe, I didn't even have to think about it. I said, be nicer to each other, respect each other, be kind to each other, work together, remember the integrity of the profession, and that will go a long way. Didn't even have to think about it.
And if we could just all, I mean, just in life in general, right, as realtors in life, if we could just do exactly what you said, just a little bit better, I think everybody would be better. Our clients would be better served. The public would be better served. Absolutely, George.
We're good.
Well, is there any, I think that's great parting wisdom, George. It's been an absolute honor to have you back here today. I just want to thank everybody for being a part of this. This has been a lot of fun. Always great to have George. He'll be back again, I sure hope, to do another one of these with me in the future. But
Gabe, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
It's been fun.
Absolutely.
Thanks, partner.
Until next time, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.